Verse 140. The world is everywhere filled with Buddhas of maturity, Buddhas of transformation, beings, Bodhisattvas, and Buddha lands. So, following on from the previous video, the spiritual practitioner is no longer getting caught up in appearances, is no longer allowing the attention to be hijacked by limited appearances, which subsequently define conventional reality. What happens is the spiritual practitioner comes back to a sense of their own being. As I pointed out in the previous video, this can be very difficult. And it can be useful to relate to a higher spiritual authority. These don't need to be Buddhas. If you're a Hindu, you've got lots of choices. If you're a Christian, you've got various choices. I think most religions have higher spiritual beings which you can relate to. You might think, well, this goes against basic teachings of the Buddha about being a light unto yourself and so on. And that's very true. But this does not mean that you are the be-all and end-all. It's up to you to choose your spiritual authority, to use them, to use these Buddhas because we need a new context now. We've given up on conventional reality. We need something which has got more appeal than conventional reality. If our attention isn't going to be drawn into limited conventions, and if we're having trouble resting in the proper appreciation of the nature of consciousness itself, then we need to relate to higher spiritual authorities. And that's what we've got here. This is what we've got here. Buddhas of maturity, Buddhas of transformation, beings, Bodhisattvas, and Buddha lands. This is the context. And in a way, this is just another description of spiritual practice. The Buddha of maturity is when the attention is resting in itself. This is enlightenment. This is successful spiritual practice. The Buddhas of transformation. These are transforming our current limitations, transforming our identification with current limitations to identifying with the highest truth, the nature of consciousness itself. So we have beings. The world is everywhere filled with beings, that's straightforward. Beings who are hopefully undergoing transformation through spiritual practice to realization. These are the Buddhas of transformation and maturity. The Bodhisattvas are the other spiritual practitioners. And the Buddha lands are the company of such practitioners. So there's a kind of triangle here. We've got beings who are spiritual practitioners, Bodhisattvas, allowing us to become Buddhas of transformation, resulting in Buddhas of maturity. The whole context being described as a Buddha land. So there's like an inverted triangle here. The next verse, verse 141, says something more about one of these Buddha lands. The issuing Buddhas, the Dharma-Buddhas, the transformation Buddhas, and those that appear transformed, they all come forth from Amitabha's land of bliss. Now, Professor Suzuki gives us the actual Sanskrit for a lot of these terms. So the Buddha of maturity mentioned in the previous verse is the Vaipakika. Buddha of transformation is the Nirmanika. And the issuing Buddha is the Nishyanda. I tried to find out some more information about this, but it's all tucked away in academic journals which you need to pay to have access to, and I'm not sure they would contain anything useful. So I'm just taking my cue here from the translation itself. We have the transformation Buddhas in the previous verse, but here we've got the issuing Buddhas and the Dharma-Buddhas, and those that appear transformed. They all come forth from Amitabha's land of bliss. There's a mythological aspect here about Buddhas appearing in all realms, under all conditions, to help beings in their suffering. And this is an important point, really, because no matter what we're going through, even hellish experience, there's a possibility to turn it around. There's a possibility to practice. So no matter how bleak things get, no matter how remote these teachings can sometimes be, there is always the opportunity to connect once again. We just need to take a step, or at least do not reject the teachings. Do not reject them as belonging to some privileged state. It's always possible to access them again if we're prepared to turn to them. And this is what's symbolized here by Amitabha's land of bliss. Represents the dispelling of whatever our fundamental mood happens to be, our fundamental limiting mood. So from this fundamental limiting mood, we see those that appear transformed. In other words, we turn to the teaching, but we don't quite buy into it. We might be inclined to dismiss it and to indulge our despair. But if we can persist and expose ourselves to the teachings once again, well, then we're back into our spiritual practice, represented here by the Buddha of transformation. We connect with the teaching, which is represented by the Dharma-Buddhas and the issuing Buddhas. Is that connection once more with the Buddhas of maturity. We're once more consolidated in our spiritual practice. So this is a very wonderful thing.